It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. We're back with another podcast. Welcome, everybody. Today we have Chad Juttner with us, Peter Lawrence, and the mighty Steve Bunda. And I'm Kyle Bacher, and today we're going to talk about Chad's calendar, because it is a sea of blue. And how do you deal with a extremely high level of scheduling meetings, activities, and more than fit in your day?
See, they all fit in the day, right?
But there's three side by side.
Well, there's on mine, there's 5. That's a new thing for me, right? Like, I've been double booked before, and I've been triple booked before. This is the first time that I've had experience being quintuple booked, and not just occasionally, frequently. And yeah,
are the people that, like, there has to be some overlap, right? You can't be the only person in the Venn diagram that's getting all of those meetings.
Yeah, there is a small amount of overlap. And it's kind of the nature of, like, the project that I'm working on right now. It is massive, and there are a lot of work streams, and we are a source of truth for quite a bit of information. And so different work streams, they want to pull at your time a little bit. And so that ends up, the effect of that is we get pulled into a lot of conversations.
Is it that they feel that you should be a part of all of these things? We really need to include Chad in this.
Yeah, and also selfishly, I want to be there because if there's a solution being discussed, I want to make sure that it aligns with, like, how I see things working, right? Because part of the reason, I think we talked about this last year or a couple of years ago, and one of the little, like, Pollyanna answers is, well, just say no, right? Like, just don't accept.
I'm cured. Thank you.
And I'm like, oh, thanks. That's great advice. There's 2 problems with that. Like, when you do, solutions get made without your input. And if you're a control freak like I am, that's not great. But also, it's role specific, right? Like, I was the first guy on this project. I have more context than anybody else on the project for a lot of this stuff. And so it's harder for me to just pull a person in and say, all right, come in and take my place here. I'm getting a little bit better about it, but it's still kind of, like, makes me nervous sometimes to just do that. So, yeah.
So you do have people you can delegate.
Yeah. That was the other, like, really easy answers, to just delegate some of this stuff. And it's not as simple as that, really, right?
Well, you're also adding a meeting because you have to delegate, and then you have to connect about what happened. Now, Steve, as somebody that's been creating the meetings for the peoples and running projects and things like that, what do you do with someone like Chad, that that they have so much going on and they need to be a part of so many things?
That's a really good question. What have I done? Probably, if I'm aware of it, I will probably pre-communicate with him and say, here's what this thing is. Do you need to be there, or do you want to be there for a portion of it, and we cover that right away and then you can go? Or things like that, like, hey, this is going to be on your calendar, but I'll give you a summary later. There's a number of different things that I can do for people that are, like, overwhelmed and double booked. And a lot of times it's having that awareness and then taking action ahead of time to alleviate any concerns or stress that I might be putting on that person.
Do you find, like, I mean, we just talked about it, like, Chad is sort of the epicenter of all the different Venn diagram loops here, just because he's been with the project for the longest, and certainly we've all been in that position, right? I've been with the project the longest. I have all the information that they're going to need. They only need me at this meeting because I have all, I can connect all of the dots and all the people, and I know exactly what's going on. I mean, in this case, I would think that you could combine a couple of those meetings together, but I'm guessing that they're obviously scheduled by different areas and different people, or, like, I see that Chad's booked, but Chad's always booked, so I'm just going to book this, and I will put the onus on Chad to make the decision, or I will put the onus on Kyle. Kyle's always double booked too, so I just put it on his calendar and let him figure it out. He'll be there if he thinks he needs to be, right?
I think that's especially for engineers, we're probably just not used to doing that, like managing managers, right? Like that's kind of part of this.
Being direct with someone as opposed to being cordial and nice about the answers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we take just a moment and reflect on times we've had to kind of put our foot down and say, if we're going to finish by this date, then I need this working time. I need this part of the project offloaded, or these tasks offloaded to someone else. Have you had those negotiations in the past where you've had to do that?
Oh, absolutely.
I would say there's two kinds of being overwhelmed for me. Okay. One is just a quantity of things that are going on, which I think might fall under the category of Chad's schedule. Like just the quantity of things. It's not like it's really taxing, for you to give the same update in 3 meetings. Other than that, it's just inefficient, right? So there's just a quantity of work, which I will find, and I went through this like in January and early February. The quantity of work was there, which in my mind, when the quantity gets to a certain point, my quality suffers.
Right.
And that's okay short term, but if that becomes the norm and it starts becoming more long term, I find that my personal job sat starts plummeting the longer I have to wrestle with the fact that the quality of my work is not where I want it to be. So that's one level of being overwhelmed.
Right.
The other level of overwhelmed is when I'm having to do something that maybe isn't something routine. For example, I had to give this 2-hour presentation at my client, which I found out about. I was voluntold that I would be giving that. And then the subject of that presentation changed after I had already put a bunch of work into it. Okay.
Oh, nice.
I had to shift, and then I had to present this thing to 50 people or whatever. Okay. Well, that was a certain level of stress. Then I had something else piled on top of that, and then I had to give another 7-hour workshop for another client. Okay. Those are things that are not routine for me to just do. So
right.
It requires a lot of prep, and for me anyway, I can't just go in there and wing it. It required a lot of prep. That was another kind of overwhelming factor, something that was heavily taxing on my brain to prep for. So those are two things. How do you guys deal with that? Because I got to the point where I'm is this really what I want to do? I don't feel like I have anything else to prove to myself. Why am I doing this? Does that make sense? How do you handle both of those?
When you're questioning your life choices and about where you ended up right then, and you're like, is this, I don't need to be specifically here. I could go somewhere else.
It's the recent meme that says, I suddenly became important at work and it's ruining my life.
I've had that moment in my head where after a really, really horrible day, just deciding to just walk away. I'm just going to quit. That's it. This is too much. I don't like it. I don't want to be doing it. And they were mean to me, and therefore it justifies all of it. And it was such a relief not having that job anymore for the rest of the evening. And then I got up the next day and went back to work because, I have a no quit rule that I made for myself a long time ago. You got to stick with it.
So was that a quantity of work issue, or was that a intensity of work issue?
It was quantity, it was intensity, and it was people problems.
People often get in the way of both of those. They provide both the intensity and the quantity sometimes.
And I think the people thing was just a disconnect in communication and in work style expectations. I didn't like the way something went down. This job isn't all cake and gravy. Consulting is hard. I'll just say that. It's a very hard job sometimes. And not for Peter, though. He makes it look easy.
I never put gravy on my cake. That just sounds horrible.
It does. Frosting.
So Chad, how much of your schedule is quantity? And we'll add the third one. How much of it is quantity? How much of it is intensity? And how much of it is people? Is it equal parts of all three that are driving you bonkers?
Yeah, the intensity lens is the different one, right? Because yes, look at my schedule, and I'm in meetings for 9-10 hours a day. Does that mean I'm like hyper focused on what's being said for 9-10 hours a day? I don't know, right? Because
Can't possibly.
but no lie, like probably 2/3 of that is like those are intense. Like you have to be engaged. I have to be like I'm actually dialed in, and I know that if I'm not, then there's going to be consequences to that. But yeah, like a third of the day, I've got my ear out for my name. I'm watching the chat to see if somebody like actually says something. But that's just me like actually messaging other folks then at that point, like getting caught up on every other aspect of what I do. And then the people part of it, like I get the end of day, like people just being annoying. I've gotten through that. Like I don't care anymore about like letting people affect my mood to whatever degree just because they were mean. I don't care if I actually prefer if they're mean at this point, right? Like I like a really mean guy. But I know that it has an effect on the rest of my team, which is why I pulled in other aspects of how I do what I do, right? Like we've got our Wednesday happy hours, and I do various things for my team when I recognize stress and even success, right? Like there's a kid on my team. I was on site in a different state for my customer. He was like just on the spot nonstop, right? It was an intense, stressful day for me, but he was right there. And so during my day, the kid has an affinity for root beer. And nowadays, we have the technology where if I'm in, I can have root beer delivered to this kid's door. So I had this, I set up this DoorDash order. And I had the DoorDash guy go around town and get like, I forget how many, I want to say like 8 or 9 different flavor kinds of root beer. And I'm like, hey man, go open your front door. And he opened his front door, and there's like a big stack of root beer that it took him, I don't know, a week and a half to get through. And it's like, that's one of the things that helps the people part of this, right? Like when that stuff like that happens, it means a lot, right? Like it makes every other aspect of what you're doing kind of like, okay, well, yeah, it was a stressful day, but this kid was able to sit back and crack a cold one. And then he wrote a review. He sent it to me yesterday. He's like, hey, I finally got through all of it. Here's a review of every root beer you sent.
See, now you have a root beer review list to carry forward and make better choices next time.
Yeah, so if you guys want to his top 3, Northern Craft Soda, number 1, 1919, number 2, and Killebrew. My favorite actually was 3rd on his list. So,
nice.
And my favorite is 2nd. I like the 1919. So, Chad, I know you have kind of rituals you do to release the pressure, to show appreciation, things like that. That's helping the other people.
Yeah, it's super important, right? Like
is that helping you?
I don't know how to answer that.
Does some of it bounce back to you? Does the joy of the root beer review take a little bit of the stress away from you? I
got as much fun hearing that kid be just delighted. And like the text messages that he sent me right away were like, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. What are you doing? How did you even know? And I'm like, that was really cool. I mean, so I got a lot out of doing that. The happy hour, I mean, obviously I enjoy a beverage or two. And so I get a lot out of doing that. So yeah, it has a non-zero impact on me as well, doing that stuff.
So is the solution to being overwhelmed?
I think what I'm getting at is the way that I've fixed that people problem and the overwhelmed problem is just to make sure that the people that I'm around are delightful. If they're not delightful, then kind of fun. And one of the things that I tell folks is, I don't know that I always articulate this well, and I'm probably not going to now, but like, know your self-worth, right? Like know who you are and what you do and what you're capable of. And like, it's probably way higher than you think it is. And knowing your self-worth lets you say a lot more and be a lot more open and honest with folks, because knowing your value and your self-worth and everything else, recognize that and then speak up and use it, to your advantage.
Well, and you're identifying a problem for them that you guys are repeating this stuff 3 times, 4 times in a day. And is that really where you want to, it's not very cost effective to use my time that way. And it's certainly not cost effective for everyone else who had to sit and listen to it more than once.
Yeah, and I think the key to that is like just recognize that your self-worth grows, right? Like I wouldn't be able to say that at the beginning of a project, right? No. But after a few months, after 6 months, it grows and grows and grows to the point where like you are. And
I think we're talking about sort of being overwhelmed in where we're at and how to sort of manage some of that. I know there are certain people, a lot of people are consummate calendar defenders, right? They start off a project and they are defending their calendar. They're keeping that space. They're blocking off time, doing things like that. That sometimes helps. Most often it doesn't, because if you're being quintuple booked, you're probably not going to keep anyone off your lunch hour very easily.
If you look at my calendar, there is always an hour at lunch that I have reserved for a person, or for Otis, right? It's my midday stress relief, right? Like him and I go, if it's nice, him and I go out for an hour and we walk around, but that is less and less respected. I mean, if you'll know, you'll also see somebody put something in at 12:30, because that's the only time that anybody has available, I guess. So I can appreciate folks that block off their calendar for various things. Mm-hmm. That tactic is less and less effective, at least for me where I'm at right now.
We always had the H, don't schedule meetings on Mondays, Fridays, or during lunch. And if the calendar was just a sea of blue, your Fridays would fill up, your Mondays would fill up, your meetings would get earlier. Hey, we're going to meet at 7 a.m. Oh my God, what are you doing to me? Yeah. But I try to block off Monday mornings.
Yeah, Kyle's not known for his early rise, hit the day running, right? You're more of an end of day.
I like to start my day at 9, end it at 5, and work straight through. I don't like lunch. Right. I like food, mm-hmm. but I don't like taking that time out of my day. I'd like to have that to myself later on. But yeah, you can block time out. But yeah, people will step on it, especially as the projects get busier and more meetings have to happen. And then the double booking is kind of stepping on your schedule as well, not respecting that you have something going on. Do you feel that way, Chad, that they're kind of stepping on your time?
Not my time, right? Like, the fact is we're consultants. We are paid hourly to do whatever our clients ask, kind of. Right? At the end of the day, that's how we make our money, is by billing hours and time. So one of the things that I said, and this is what I said the other day, is that I do get paid hourly, right? If this is an effective use of company's money, if people are getting value out of doing this multiple times a day, I'll do it. But again, I'm an hourly employee. And so spend that money however you want. And if, like to Steve's point, it is not emotionally, or it's not intellectually taxing for me to repeat the same information 4 times at all.
It's just annoying.
It is. Well, it's annoying, and it's expensive for the client. And when you call that out to them, right? Like, sometimes ears perk up, and sometimes situations like that get fixed. And especially if you put it into like, hey, if this is how you want me to spend my time, happy to do it. Hourly employee, right? Like, the checks cash the same either way, right? Like, if I'm in a meeting, I charge the same as if I'm actually writing code and doing, making progress. So like, there's that aspect to all of what's going on with my calendar, is that like, hey man, if that's how they want to spend, the rate that they're giving me, do I love it? No, right? Like, I prefer to write code. I prefer to like actually build things. But I also don't hate making money for the company that I love. So if this is how we're doing it right now, and there's no cap on how many hours I can bill, the client lets me go nuts if I need to, and I would bill more hours than exist in a week just by attending meetings. Yeah, I'm fine with it. Really.
So Steve, as the scheduler of meetings, do you ever double book yourself? No,
not myself. And I rarely try to. The only time I double book somebody else is when it's a relatively urgent meeting and I have to invite, let's say, 12 people, right. And 11 of them are available and 1 isn't, and then I go send a message, and I try to make sure that that one person is not like super critical to the meeting, and go, hey, I know this double booked you here, your choice whether you want to attend or not. So I try not to double book people unless it is like an absolute urgent thing.
I know we were talking to Brian Davidson at Book Club the other day about his book on meetings, and he had a very, from my standpoint, a utopian view of how to do meetings, right? Take time before the meetings, have 2 to 5 minute mini meetings with people, discuss what you're trying to accomplish, make sure that you have the right people involved, and you've you've talked to them. They know whether they need to be there. They could just provide you the information ahead of time. You might get rid of the meeting altogether by having these mini meetings. And it sounded absolutely wonderful. And I'm not sure I could ever pull that off in my entire career where I would have enough time to make that happen. I don't think that he's not doing. I do think that he is doing that, and that he is making those things happen. His is just a little different world than the developer world, where you get to hands down develop for a while and then go to meetings and distribute the information.
I have a thing that I do, and it's, who's the busiest? Okay, that's the person that should schedule the meeting. My calendar has a lot of space in it, and that's by design. And someone else's is a sea of blue. You tell me what works for you, because I don't want to fill that only available slot in a very stressful day that you have. So you go ahead and set it up, and I'll show up.
I mean, is this following the adage of, if you want something done, ask a busy person to do it?
I hate that advice.
Huh?
No, not at all. It's, your calendar and your schedule way better than I do, and where our meeting can fit in best with what you're doing, not just me going out and seeing availability and filling that gap.
That may be slightly utopian as well, and let me give a counterpoint to that. Because I have had someone recently, a client, who fits that mode of sea of blue. Mine is less busy, and the big complaint is, hey, we can't get on this person's calendar, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this person said, what I want you to do, call me and ask me when I can actually rearrange something. And I'm like, what? That sounds incredibly inefficient. You want me to call you and ask you how you might be able to rearrange that? When no one else has ever asked that. I thought that was very interesting. Like,
maybe it would have been better if he had scheduled the meeting.
Right. As I often say, when somebody says, well, hey, could you schedule a meeting? I'm like, doesn't your Outlook work? Can't you send meetings? So that's kind of funny. But we've kind of devolved into the Outlook thing rather than the overwhelm thing. I want to ask, are we able to detect when someone is overwhelmed? What are the signs that they are? And Chad, you mentioned sending your colleague some root beer. Was that detecting that he was overwhelmed, and you were trying to kind of handle that in that way? How do we know that somebody's overwhelmed?
Question. It's I talk a lot about empathy, right? Like a lot about it, and just like connecting with your team, right, aggressively, to whatever degree folks are comfortable with, and that's different for different people. Like last night, I babysat for a team member, right? Like after my Sea of Blue calendar, I went and I babysat twins, because, well, that person's not on my team anymore, but they were, and I did that before when they were. I practice this different kind of connectedness with folks that especially the people on my project and on my team, and then I try to extend that to as many folks at the company that I work for. And as you get to know people, you just recognize patterns, right? Like there's some pattern recognition that happens, and when they break, there's something wrong. So the root beer was for a kid that was doing amazing work for me when I was stressed out. Babysitting was for somebody that was on my project that was incredibly valuable and also needed a break. What did I do? The week before, I brought a smorgasbord of blizzards to a coworker that was in the hospital, one of our phones. And
is that a Minnesota word, smorgasbord?
A smorgasbord, yeah. I didn't know what flavor they like, so I just went and grabbed like 6 smalls, right? Have them. But there's like this, as you get like, and you can't do that without like knowing people, right? Like you've got to be able to like really know what people want, and that you do that by spending as much time with them as you can. And this is why, like, I feel like it's kind of a joke. Oh, Chad does happy hours. That's all he wants to do. Well, no, I want to actually be able to know the people that I work with really well.
Right.
I want to be able to recognize when they're stressed. I don't want to just like read in a status report, I'm stressed out, right? Like I want to be able to know that ahead of time, and I want to be able to respond to that if I can, if it's within my control to, not all your coworkers are going to invite you to their hospital room. Not all coworkers are going to invite you into their home to babysit their children. But I promise you there's something that you can do, everybody can do, to help folks that are in this like overwhelming like mess of a schedule, as long as you know them well, and you don't get to know them without.
I'm going to draw an analogy that I think summarizes what you just said.
Yeah.
Because I know you're a canine enthusiast.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe your spirit animal is also the dog, because what it sounds like you do is you sit there and act like the dog, knowing your teammates, seeing what is normal constantly, so that you can detect and bark when things are abnormal.
Yeah, that's not a bad analogy. Yeah, I mean,
It's like a service animal.
that's even better. Yeah. But yeah, I
Get him
do.
the coat.
And for me, yeah, you're right, Steve. Like a lot of my stress relief comes from, I mean, that guy has a heavy burden put on him. That guy being my dog, I forgot this is audio only. Him and I are pretty much, we're codependent, right? Like when I'm not at work or around people, it's him. This is a funny little side story. I also enjoy baseball. I think you guys know that. And I enjoy baseball cards. A couple of days ago, my little buddy, I had some baseball cards sitting on a TV stand upstairs that I just opened. I managed to pull a Jackie Robinson card. Love Jackie Robinson, one of my biggest non-Twins players. It probably my favorite player outside of the Twins organization. And I was holding it and I was like, whatever. And then I went to work and I got a text message from home, a picture of the card, and Otis got it and chewed it up. And my wife said, hey, I think I finally found something that's going to make you that's going to make you mad at Otis, because the dude can't do anything to get me mad, right? He sent me a picture of the card, and I'm like, oh, I'm not mad at Otis. I'm a little mad at myself that I didn't put him away, but that's actually kind of sweet, because he could probably smell me on the card. And it was very, very, and she got mad. She's like, well, you'd be furious at me. I'm like, well, yeah, if you chewed up one of my baseball cards, there's food in the fridge, right? Like you don't need
That would be really weird.
baseball card. And then somebody saw that. I showed that text exchange to somebody else, and he said, well, it's maybe your dog smelled you on the card.
Steve, turning that question around, how do you recognize people are overwhelmed?
It's their behaviors. Like I can even pick it up like virtually. Like I can tell when somebody that I know well, like I can usually know within a couple of minutes that something's off. And then I will just go, hey, are you doing okay? But those are only with the people that I know well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, there are plenty of people that, well, I don't know that person well enough to know whether this is a signal or not. And also, in the virtual world, if people aren't on camera, I have a really hard time knowing.
It definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, and I'm a huge advocate for people being on camera during meetings. I totally get it. There are times when it doesn't make sense, like you're eating lunch, Nobody wants to eat lunch on camera. Maybe you're not a key participant, but then I would also argue if you're not a key participant and you're not actively participating in the meeting, why are you there? But I'm a huge advocate for being on camera because of the nonverbal cues, and that over 50% of all communication is nonverbal. In fact, you can argue it's up down around 80 to 90%. You have to know the person, and doing things like Chad was talking about to get to know them helps you detect that.
I usually pick up on moods pretty quickly, and so it's sometimes just a bad mood, but sometimes there's a root cause to it. And a person with their head down, walking fast, is obviously doesn't have time to stop and chat. Doesn't make time. It's just goes in their office, closes the door all day, hides out. There's residual things over time you can see, maybe quality drops, maybe they, visible signs of exhaustion, and, their decision making isn't as high a quality as it was. It's just the fatigue, the battle fatigue that is hitting them. It's like, can you pick it up before that point, before it gets to that point? Because the next step is burnout right after that. So,
right.
I always like to help people, and I like to help them as soon as I possibly can. And, if it's tech issues, I feel their pain. I have empathy. I have a person right now that can't log in their system and they're on vacation. And so they need to use the device to scan the QR code on their device. It's like, do you have a mirror? Like, well, no, I can't have the app up if the thing, it's like, okay. And it's an iPhone. It's like, so we're all getting frustrated, but I can tell that this is not something that is helping. And it's like, okay, let's get you in the bypass group for the moment, take care of it. So in the moment, I'm usually dealing with people that are not having the best day ever because they're reaching out to me to solve a problem. And so I try to solve the problem, but I also try to make them feel better. Some people, when they reach out, they're beating themselves up about it because they're having a computer problem. Oh, I'm so stupid. It's horrible. I shouldn't have had to call you. This is all it's like, no. So it's putting people at ease, whatever I can do there. But it's hard because I don't see people on a regular basis as much as I used to. And that in person is like, that's the missing piece is there's a lot of empathy that comes through being in the room with somebody that doesn't come through the camera. And then just plain audio is even worse. So It's, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, those are my favorite days at the office because that's when the most people are in and I get to see them. And sometimes it's, if, in a tech support role, if somebody doesn't show their frustration and all of that, you're not as responsive, or you don't feel like you have to be as responsive.
That is, but I don't know if any of you are fans of Ted Lasso, but there was an episode where there was a critical moment where the coach is talking to the press and he says, this person acted out in a bad way, but none of us know what each other is going through in our lives, right?
Right.
And this gets back to having empathy that Chad talked about. Like, we don't know what's going on. And as I would argue, everyone is dealing with their own personal pile of crap at any given time. And I think the more empathy we can have, the greater we can have the ability to lessen that burden. It's just trying to detect it and help them in a way that they're willing to accept help, right? Because sometimes, quite frankly, sometimes I can get into the mode like, pile it on. I can take it. I'm getting a rush off of this because I am doing, the Herculean task here of doing it all. I've been there. And then sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Do you find that way? You get that way, Peter? Do you like being the king and just taking on everything? And then what happens?
Oh yeah, I don't want to call it circadian, but I certainly have ebbs and flows of I want to do it all. I want to do nothing. I want to sit, close my eyes, and just let the world pass me by. I know we were talking earlier. I was going to say, like, one of the things that I try to do is check in one-on-one with people because they're more willing to be open and explosive. Another phrase at the client that somebody says is, comments, questions, concerns, emotional outbursts, right? Which is always a funny way to tag it in there and just let somebody go. If they happen to have an emotional outburst, it's a funny time to let it loose, right? But yeah, I definitely try to take especially the emotional or the pressure burden from my team as much as possible, just because I've been around the block a few thousand times, and it just really, like, there are times where pressure gets to me and I will have sleepless nights like everyone who's worked for a living. You get to a point where it builds up and your mind won't let you sleep, but they're pretty few and far between. I can just let things go. Maybe not quite a Disney movie, let it go, but a lot of things just roll off nowadays, because when I look back at experiences that I was really feeling stressed about in the past, anything I did to change it didn't really change it. Anything, it just changed over time. So let some time go by and see what happens.
I look at, there's a lot of stuff that can happen with people outside of work. And there's always this idea that you should keep the personal stuff separate from the work stuff. So it's like this expectation that no matter what problems you have outside of work, you should walk in and be a champ. And I don't really think that's, because it all, work leaks into the personal life, just like personal life leaks into work. And it's like, both is going to happen, and you can't just shut the one off and call that fair. But that does have an impact, understanding. But, it's like, things are going on, and the kind of the root cause in the current moment is the stuff going on outside of work. That's really hard to address because it's really not your business necessarily. Right. How do you deal with that, Steve?
I think the more, I don't need to know a lot of details about what everybody's dealing with. That just feels like more than I need, but I just need to know if somebody is dealing with something. Just let me know, and I'll accommodate that in as best as I can. And similarly, although I say that, and I compartmentalize to beat the band.
Stuff it away, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally. But sometimes, in the right scenario, in the right situation, Chad talked about reaching out to people and having a happy hour or whatever. Sometimes there's a situation comes up. Okay, this is the forum where I can share X, right? Mm-hmm. And hopefully you can also reach that right forum for other people to go, here's where I'm willing to share X. Here's where I'm willing to say I'm overwhelmed. Other than that, I think it's just a process of building towards that ideal forum.
Making a safe space for somebody to be able to open up and tell you, I'm going through something right now. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it is going to affect my work. Mm-hmm. There, I said it. Now let's move on.
Right, whatever, and then I can say, okay, what can I take off your plate right now? What can you give me? Let me. How about this? I'll go take care of that. You don't need to worry about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think most humans on a team will do that, right? Most people have they don't like to force someone to suffer. They're mad when you're not doing your work, right? Oh, so-and-so is not keeping up everybody else is high performing and this guy's just muddling along. Right. Well, maybe his house burned down, or, we've surprisingly, working with people nationwide, there's been a few tornadoes and fires and floods and other things going on, and those sometimes hit close or hit people that you're working with. And okay, now that I know that, I don't really care that your work is suffering, because if my house burned down, you might not even know that I'm here, or I might be here working 40 hours really hard, buckled down, because I don't want to think about my house burning down. Right? Everybody handles it differently. So, yeah.
And sometimes burden shared, burden lifted.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I'm not really good at being part of a team. Because I've done so much of my career has been flying solo on things.
Yeah, you've been a lone cowboy all over the place.
And so asking for help, asking Peter to be tech support at the big event was hard to do.
I loved it. I got a lot of steps in that day.
I wanted to be, because I want to be the guy. Yeah, I'll fix it all. And a lot of times I'm in that role anyway, so it's kind of what I gravitate to. And who doesn't want to be the hero and all that? But it's too much, and speaking at the event and then doing all the tech for it and getting it all set up. It's a lot of work, and just that one thing made my night way more enjoyable. I didn't do that last year, and I love the big event. I love doing it, putting it on, but at the time, it kind of sucked because there was.
I don't think you looked like
happening.
You enjoyed that big event last year.
No, I didn't, but I wouldn't give it up. No, because a lot of other people did enjoy it, and I think it's worth it. So, any parting thoughts as we wind down?
I'm going to part with Steve's quote. I mean, burden shared, burden lifted. That sounds like a wonderful, easy way to manage a lot of this stuff. Either personal burdens or you're my fourth meeting for this time slot. I can't prioritize all four of these. Who do I need to talk to help me get rid of some of this stuff? And if they say nobody, then you're just like, okay. We'll just do our best. Steve, how about you?
I think the empathy thing has been a theme this week. Chad brought that up. And also, Kyle, when you talked about some things you don't want to give it up, like sometimes it's a little bit of a high. It's been that way. And then I'm maybe interpreting some of your words differently. But I felt like, hey, if I can take this on and be the man, I get a high from that, even if it's at the expense of my own mental health sometimes. So yeah. I just need to be self-aware on that regard.
I think there's Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think Steve nailed it. I think it's just initially this is going to be about time management, ridiculous schedules, and everything else. And I think the advice that you give those people is there's no advice, right? Like, especially as a consultant that bills hourly, it's on you to kind of figure it out. There's no there's nothing we're going to say to somebody there's nothing anybody's going to say to somebody like me right now and be like, oh gosh, I hadn't thought of that. Thanks. Right. Like
platitudes.
Yeah.
Prioritize. You need to reprioritize.
Hang in there.
Block out time.
Yeah. Send me a
Learn
poster
to say no
on a branch. Hang in there. Cat's been on the branch for 4 years now. So sucks, but there's nothing to say, right? Like there's no real good advice we can give folks that are stuck in a situation where they're quintuple booked at times. Recognize it and spend time with them. Be around them as much as you can. And if you do need to talk to them, be where they're going to be, right? Like this is a thing that I tell folks, like, hey, if you really want to, can we talk about this at happy hour, right? Like I'd much rather not sit on another Teams call. I get folks to happy hour. I'm a little more comfortable there. And it's a little more fun for me to be there than in an office, in a desk, at a wherever. So sorry. If you're booked in meetings 10 hours a day, quit being the kind of guy that people want to talk to all the time. Never become good. I think as somebody said that earlier, right? There was a quote that, God damn it, all of a sudden I'm good at something at work and it ruined my life.
Because then the pile-on begins. My advice is for myself. Sometimes I have to take a step back and go, maybe I need to work a little smarter. Maybe I need to batch some of these tasks. Maybe I need to ask for help more, try to move things around. I get way more done. I'm way more effective on tasks before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm fried after that. So maybe I move my, update the inventory in the afternoon and schedule calls and stuff. And it's like the saying that you can build a small fire and sit close, or you can build a big fire and haul wood all night. So that's my final word. I think with that, we can say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.